Good morning, everybody. I'm Michael Schultz, and I'm back here at Antioch Baptist Church. Don't worry, I have not been taken hostage by Pakistani terrorists. This is just a whiteboard behind me, but it's the best setup that I could find in our church. So it does kind of look like I'm making a hostage video here and trying to send word back to my folks that I'm okay. But we'll work with what we've got, and apologize about canceling service today. Just didn't really have much of an option. Of course, I would have had everybody here, but Storm decided that with ice on the roads and with more rain coming last night, and a lot of people are sick with the crud, just a lot of reasons to just take a week and say, you know what, let's just come back on Wednesday, and we'll have our teen kids on Wednesday at 6 o'clock, and we'll try to get back on track next week. Have a couple of announcements about that at the end of this video. I want to keep this video pretty short. And so, real briefly, let's just go through a quick study on a topic that's very important, which is killing sin. John Owen has a very valuable and important quote. It's pretty famous. It's oftentimes stolen and plagiarized. But John Owen made this quote a couple hundred years ago where he said, "You'll either be killing sin or sin will be killing you." And that's very true. The more common vernacular in the Bible Belt is sin will take you further than you intended to go, keep you longer than you wanted to stay, and cost you more than you were willing to pay. And so all of these different ways of talking about the cost of sin and the degenerative nature of sin that continues to compound on a person's life if they don't take care of sin, this all is very familiar to us. And in our personal lives, we can recognize that sin builds on itself. If you tell a lie, you have to tell another lie to keep that lie going, whether that's with your spouse or with your teacher or whatever it may be. And so I want to go through a couple of passages that tell us what the Bible says we ought to be doing with sin, particularly in our lives, and with how that we relate to sin in the world around us. And I want to read, the largest passage that we're going to read is out of the book of 2 Kings. It's a story that you may not be familiar with. It's one of my favorite stories in the Bible. It's about a guy named Jehu. In 2 Kings chapter 10, we get the story of a guy named Jehu, and Jehu was he wasn't a very good man. He served his purpose. We can summarize his life that way. He served his purpose. But Jehu wasn't a very good man, and yet he was very serious about sin. At least insofar as it related to his nation. His personal sin wasn't particularly so heinous in his sight, which is a blind spot that many people hold. They can point out the sin in other people's lives, but they don't like to point out the sin in their own. Guilty of that myself, I know, and any self-respecting Christian will admit that we're all pretty guilty of that. But in the book of 2 Kings in chapter 10, looking at verses 18 through 27, we see the seriousness with which Jehu treats sin. See, the nation of Israel had a problem where many of their followers or many of their citizens were following Baal, which was an Old Testament false god, and a lot of heinous things were done as far as Baal worship went. It was part involved in child sacrifice and part involved in bloodletting, where you would spill your own blood on the altar. We see that in the case of the argument, if you want to call it that, the confrontation with Elijah. So this is a very weird religion, and a lot of Israelites were getting involved in it, and Jehu wanted to make sure that it was purged out of their land in his time. And so in 2 Kings chapter 10, he devises this plan, and starting in verse 18, it says, "Jehu assembled all the people and said to them, Ahab served Baal a little, but Jehu will serve him much." And you might be thinking, well, no, that doesn't sound like he's taking care of it. It sounds like he's embracing Baal. Let's read on. He says, "Now therefore, call to me all the prophets of Baal and all his worshippers and all his priests. Let none be missing, for I have a great sacrifice to offer to Baal. Whoever is missing shall not live." Now, still, you might be thinking, it sounds like he's embracing Baal. Let's read the rest of verse 19. "But Jehu did it with cunning in order to destroy the worshippers of Baal." Now, this is one of those instances in the Bible where we see somebody doing something that we might think is ethically or morally questionable. He's willing to purge the nation of a false religion, and he's doing it in a cunning way. He's more or less tricking everybody. Let's see what he does. Verse 20, and Jehu ordered, sanctify a solemn assembly for Baal. So they proclaimed it. And Jehu sent throughout all Israel, and all the worshippers of Baal came, so that there was not a man left who did not come. And they entered the house of Baal, and the house of Baal was filled from one end to the other. And he said to him who was in charge of the wardrobe, bring out the vestments for all the worshippers of Baal. So he brought out the vestments for them. And then Jehu went into the house of Baal with Jehonadab, the son of Rechab, and he said to the worshippers of Baal, search and see that there is no servant of the Lord here among you, but only the worshippers of Baal. You see what he's doing? He's gathered all the Baal worshippers together. He's putting them all in clothing that would indicate who they are. And then he says, let none of them here be people that follow the Lord. That's important. Okay? Now, moving on. Verse 24. Then they went in to offer sacrifices and burnt offerings. And Jehu had stationed 80 men outside and said, the man who allows any of those whom I give into your hands to escape shall forfeit his own life. So this is actually reminiscent of Roman law way further in history, where if you held someone prisoner and you let that prisoner escape, you became the prisoner. If someone was sentenced to death and you let them get away, you inherited their sentence to death. And so this was something that a guard would take very seriously. And he gives this command to the people that are outside this house of Baal. And he says, if any of the people in this building get out, you die. All right? Very serious. Verse 25. So as soon as he had made an end of offering the burnt offering, Jehu said to the guard and to the officers, go in and strike them down, let not one man escape. So when they put them to the sword, the guard and the officers cast them out and went into the inner room of the house of Baal, and they brought out the pillar that was in the house of Baal and burned it. And they demolished the pillar of Baal and demolished the house of Baal and made it a latrine to this day. Now that's desecration of a temple. That's desecration of a quote-unquote holy place. That's what you do with sin. You get all of it together and you execute it. This is John Owen spoken all over. Either be killing sin or sin will be killing you. This is what Jehu does. He gets together all of the worshippers of the false god, all of those that caused Israel to sin, and he makes sure none of you worship the true Lord. None of you worship the one God of Israel. Okay. And he purges the nation of that. Now there's other examples of this in the Old Testament. One other example is in Joshua chapter 7. I'm not going to read it for you. It's famously known as the sin of Achan. You can find it in Joshua 7 verses 10 through 26. Achan was a man who was in the Israelite army, and he was a member of the Israelites as they're walking into the promised land, going throughout, conquesting through the promised land, taking the land that God had given them. And God had told them that as they go city to city, not to take any plunder from the cities, but to offer up some of the first fruits to the Lord, and then just to destroy the rest. And Achan thought that nobody would notice if he took some gold. So he took some of the gold and some silver, and he took some profit and some plunder from some of the cities that they had taken. And all of a sudden the Israelites begin to lose their battles, and God makes clear to the people that there's sin in the camp. And so they go through this process of figuring out why that this has happened, and they narrow it down and they figure it out that it's Achan, and they find the treasure that he's stolen. And how do they respond? They kill him. And they don't just kill him, they kill everybody that knew that he had done this and that did nothing. Those that were complicit, those that were accomplices in this sin, they kill them as well. Now, the Old Testament economy is quite different from the New Testament economy, and we're no longer under the Levitical laws. We're no longer under the national laws of Israel, because the nation of Israel passed away in 70 AD. It was no more, and its reestablishment in 1948 did not reestablish the Mosaic law or anything on that matter. We're still under the moral law, of course. The Ten Commandments most predominantly illustrate the moral law. But the Old Testament economy is very different. We can't go around and just see somebody sinning and just, stab them to death and say, well, that's that. God told me to. That's not the way that things work. But how are we to treat sin in the New Testament? Are we to find people that are sinning and kill them? Well, I just said no. Are we supposed to look at sin in our own lives, and if we're sinning, should we somehow punish ourselves? The Catholic Church for centuries told people to wear these coarse cloths that would tear your body up with rashes so that you would show your religiousness and your sincerity to God so that He would forgive you, or you would take whips and whip your own back, or you would punish yourself in some way to show God that you were pious and sorry. Is that what we're meant to do? Well, the Bible actually gives us quite illustrative instructions on how we're to handle sin in our own lives. I want to read one verse out of the book of Romans. Romans chapter 8 and verse 13 is a very quick and to-the-point description of how it is that we're to handle sin in our day. It says in Romans 8:13, "If you live according to the flesh, you will die. But if you by the Spirit put to death the deeds of the body, you will live." Now, notice the antecedent of his statement here. If you live according to the flesh, you will die. If you, by the Spirit, put to death the deeds of the body, you will live. Paul instructs us, under the inspiration of the Holy Spirit, to kill sin in our own lives. Not to kill ourselves, not to kill our brothers, not to kill our neighbors, not to kill those that tempt us, not to kill those that lead us astray as Jehu did, but to kill the sin in our own lives. To take it seriously enough that we must mortify it. Kill it. Now Jesus gave us very strong verbiage as well along these same lines, and I remember as a kid reading this for the first time and thinking that this was absolutely crazy because I didn't know what He expected of me. I thought that this was something that I was going to have to figure out how to do without my parents finding out. Jesus says in Matthew chapter 5 verses 29 and 30, "If your right eye causes you to sin, tear it out and throw it away. It's better that you lose one of your members than that your whole body be thrown into hell. And if your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it away. It's better that you lose one of your members than that your whole body goes into hell." Jesus makes very clear, if something in your life is causing you to sin, remove it. Remove it. Get away from it. Now, this is something that we tend to have a hard time following in our day. Because if you struggle with alcoholism, there's a liquor store on every corner, and there's a bar on every street. And if you struggle with drug addiction or opioid addiction, particularly, which is a difficult one in our local community, if you struggle with methamphetamine addiction, there seems to be people that are willing to peddle that stuff in every other house. If you struggle with pornography, you've got a cell phone in your pocket and a laptop on your desk. It's so easy to access the things that lead us astray today. And as well for those that don't deal with, per se, such serious addictions, but you deal with anger, you deal with hatred, you deal with bitterness, you deal with resentment, you deal with a lack of forgiveness. These sorts of temptations are everywhere in our age today. And if we went about, as the Old Testament economy instructed, to remove sin from our place by killing, we would kill everyone around us. And if we followed these instructions to the letter and not to the essence of what Christ was telling us, we would all be without hands and without eyes. What is the Bible telling us to do when Paul tells us to kill sin by the Spirit? What is Jesus telling us to do when He says to gouge out our eyes or cut off our hands? He's saying be reckless and ruthless when it comes to removing sin from your own life. Be reckless and ruthless. Pay no regard to the value of something if it causes you to sin. And this can be friends, it can be family, it can be phones, it can be laptops, it can be a job. If something is continually guiding you into sinning against God, get away from it. Kill it in your life. I'm going to write these passages up here and then go through a couple of announcements. If you want to read these yourself, you can always go back in the video and hear me quote them, but I'll write them up here for you quickly. That was 2 Kings 10, 18 through 27. The next was Joshua 7. And it's verses 10 through 26. And that's the sin of Achan. And that was Jehu. The next that I read was Romans 8:13, and the final one that I read was Matthew 5, 29 and 30. Now, for those of you that are members here at Antioch, next week was supposed to be Great Commission Sunday. That's the third Sunday in every month with 5. And because of this cancellation, I want to push that back. We're going to do that on the 4th Sunday of the month. And so next week, that'll be the 16th, we're going to come back and talk about Great Commission Sunday, the imperative of doing it, and what it's going to look like and how to do it properly. And so in the meantime, be praying for your neighbors in your local community so that they can, so that God will be moving in their lives as we plan that He will. And be praying for yourself and for your church so that we would have the courage and the upstanding fortitude to go out and actually do this, that God would give us a good acclimate weather opportunity so that we can go into our community and begin to reach our local community. And for those of you that are members that aren't planning on being a part of that, be praying for the people that are. Be praying for those that are going, and ask how that you can get involved. There are a lot of ways that you can support this. As for this week, Wednesday we're going to have Team Kids at 6 o'clock like normal. For the adult class, we're going to continue our study of the Lord's Prayer, and everything else is going to get back on track as normal. So if there's nothing that I'm forgetting, if I am forgetting something, it'll be posted in the description under this video, or it'll be posted in the Facebook post that this is attached to. But if there's nothing else, may God be with you, stay safe, and we'll hope to see you next Sunday on January the 16th, 2022. We love you guys. We'll see you soon.